Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be episode 3 of Beth's Brew-Time Babble. Now before I get into the topic that I'm going to talk about in this particular Brew-Time Babble, I just want to apologise to anyone who might be offended by this particular mug. I am not a football fan, neither am I a Liverpool fan. However, my dad is a die-hard Liverpool fan and he has numerous Liverpool mugs around the house, and today it's a bit of a dreary Tuesday and I'm staying in to film some videos, so I've made myself just a normal cup of tea. Don't want to spill it on camera, so see if you can. Ooh. So I've just made myself a normal cup of tea, and this was one of the only mugs lying to hand because I do tend to drink a lot of tea when I'm at home. So I apologise, I'm not really a Liverpool fan, but you know, it's going on the thumbnail, you're going to see it, so I just want to let anybody who's not a Liverpool fan know that I'm not causing any trouble with you guys. So anyway, the topic to hand today is a book that I've recently finished. Now, if you follow me at all, you'll know that I did an end of summer wrap up recently, and I'm going to do an October book haul / TBR that's going to come really soon. But this is one book that fell in the middle, that I finished towards the end of September, but I've only read one book. I was planning to read many and just tag it onto the October wrap up. However, I've only read one, so I just thought it'd be easier here to give you an in-depth conversation about it and how I felt about it, because it was a very interesting read. So that one was How Not to Be a Boy by Robert Webb. Now this is an autobiography by him, and it's his first. Now for anybody who's international or doesn't understand or doesn't recognise Robert Webb as a person, he is a famous comedian in Britain. Now he's not famous for stand-up, he's famous for being in comedy sitcoms, and usually he is in sitcoms with another comedian called David Mitchell, and they've often been referred to as the infamous duo Mitchell and Webb. And their most famous one was The Peep Show, which they had Olivia Colman, who, when you read this book, you find out that they all met at Cambridge, and that's how they ended up starting this comedy duo or comedy trio, because they've also been in series together. And they've also wrote a lot of comedic sitcoms for British TV programmes as well, so they are quite famous in the little British sphere. But if you're international and he doesn't ring a bell, that's really who he is, and he's quite famous in the UK. But this particular story is very interesting because it doesn't really go into a lot of depth about his comedic background, so I'm just going to shuffle a little bit. Instead, this is a very interesting, open and frank discussion about gender, masculinity and sexuality. Now Robert Webb cuts this book into two main parts, and it's about being a boy and then being a man, and it has references to it. I'm just going to put this cup of tea down so I can show you a little bit better. But it has references to all the things that he feels in his life he's been told as a man or as a boy not to do. So it says here, if you can just see some of these examples, some being boys are brave, men don't need therapy, boys aren't shy. So it's kind of an in-depth look at the expectation from being very young that Robert has felt has been placed on him as a man to behave in a certain way. Now this was very raw. There's some bits that are very upsetting, in which he discusses how he lost his mum at a very young age, and he has a father who is trying his best, but based on the generation that he's lived in and the expectation that he had as a young boy, he projects this expectation on Robert to be a stereotypical male. Now he's got two other brothers who seem to conform to that quite well, or we get the opinion from Robert in this book that they do. However, he's the different one, and everyone references throughout the book that Robert has to be different, and we get that that difference is him being more effeminate than his two brothers. And he copes with the loss of his mother very badly. He ends up having to resit his A-levels, and he finally gets into Cambridge, and he has an idea that he's ploughing forward and he's doing a lot, but he doesn't realise till he enters adulthood and he becomes a father the impact that the expectation of masculinity placed on him in childhood then has an impact in his relationship with his wife and his relationship with his daughters when he first becomes a father. So he then, I think, uses this book to trace back all this expectation on him, and it was a fascinating look at gender, because predominantly a lot of gender studies out there focus on femininity and feminism and the plight of women, but this, I feel, is something that's very underrepresented, that we put a lot of pressure on males in society, and it's not just in the UK, it's also in America and further afield, and Western cultures in particular, but also to some extent in developing countries as well, that we put an expectation on men to be brave, to not talk about their feelings. And in here he references how he's aware that a lot of men go through mental health problems, suicide being the most extreme outcome of these mental health problems that men feel because they're subjected, or they have pressure on them to conform to this idea of masculinity. And he's basically opening up the idea that that is not a one fits all, and that realistically what he talks about in here is that it's not just detrimental to men, it's detrimental to women, and that this patriarchy, this thing that he refers to and that he teaches his daughters at the end of the autobiography, is counterproductive to everybody, and it affects both men and women, and we should be fighting against it together, not women fighting purely against it and men having an issue with it. So I thought this was very raw, and it was fascinating because I'd never read an autobiography from somebody who's famous that really was very, very blunt. And obviously it would have been very difficult for him to go through certain memories he talks about in his youth, how he had a confusing time understanding his sexuality. He never outwardly references whether he identifies as bisexual or not, but he references in his teen years he had experiences with both men and women. And it's a fascinating look at how it was a very confusing time as a teenager, and he has a father who can't really understand, and it's quite endearing at the end that he tries to rebuild his relationship with his dad, and he tells his dad, he admits that he previously had sexual experiences with men in his teen years, and his father tries to make it a manly thing. He tries to say, oh, us Webbs, you know, we get the job done kind of thing, which I thought was amusing because his father's trying to still project masculinity on something which is considered in society a very effeminate behaviour. So I thought that was really interesting. And his father, I could really resonate with that character. Now, I didn't have a father that was violent or anything like this dad, but I could really sympathise with a kind of northern father, or a certain sheltered upbringing, or an expectation that they have of how people should behave, and trying his best to be caring and loving and to his son, but not fully understanding why he can't behave like his brothers, and not being able to talk about feelings very well. I can resonate with that. Living one-on-one with a male parental figure, which I can resonate, it's a similar experience that I've had. It is very difficult to talk about feelings with a male figure because they haven't been given the tools to talk about how they feel either. And he mentions a lot about how a lot of male figures in this book to him, people he looked up to, were grieving. There was a really interesting bit in this book as well where he goes to Cambridge, and one of the men that he ends up meeting there is grieving for a lost cat that they lost before he came to university, and he's trying not to be bitter about the fact that he feels like losing his mum was a way more big deal for him, and he represses a lot of his feelings, and he converts it to anger, which he says is what society tells men to do, to put all their feelings and convert them into anger, which isn't healthy for anyone. So I just thought I would do a little Brew-Time Babble about this particular book because I think it is more than an autobiography. It's a really interesting look at masculinity and the projections of that, and it really made me become a big fan of Robert Webb. Now I've watched The Peep Show and I thought it was funny, and you have an expectation of what that person's going to be like because of the characters they play. He usually plays slobby characters who lose their way, but it is a very endearing quality to be so frank and honest about your experiences to an audience of potentially millions of readers will read this book. I think that takes a lot of guts, and it's really warmed me to the capabilities of a person like this. He's expressed his failures. There's so much humour in here. There's not a bitterness or a darkness. There's just an honesty that is very refreshing, and it's not something I'm used to in autobiographies, especially with comedians who tend to make their whole life seem like a comedic saga. He doesn't express superiority or a pompousness. You know? He's a story of a difficult beginning and turning it into something productive, and acknowledging that society's placed restrictions on him, and he's attempting to break through that and to notify a lot of people. This book seemed to me as if he took one for the team almost and said, I'll tell you about some of these things that have been through my life so that other men can resonate with this story and can feel a sense of a community that feel the same way, that feel exploited by the current system. So I just thought it was a really, really interesting book. If anybody else has read it, I would love you to comment down below with what you thought about it. If you have any recommendations to similar books like this, because I was really fascinated by this take on masculinity, this frankness, this refreshing look at it, and the educational richness that came out of this. If anybody else can recommend any gender studies, it doesn't have to be on masculinity, it can be on feminism or femininity, because I'm really interested in gender studies. Please link some down below, comment down below with any suggestions. If you haven't read this, let me know if it'd be something that you'd be interested in. Just feel free to start a conversation down below in the comment section. I would really enjoy a conversation with you guys. And also, if you guys enjoy Beth's Brew-Time Babble, suggest any further videos I can do. If you enjoy having a cup of tea when you make videos or you watch videos, please let me know what you drink, what mugs you have. Anything book related that you want to talk to me about, please just comment down below. I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about these things. And I'll see you very soon for another video. Bye.